And now, from the great state of Mississauga in Ontario, Canada, it's the Ted Wallachin Podcast. Brought to you by Tom's Place. For the finest in men's fashion, Tom's Place will suit you. And ETP Canada, providing estate administration with ease. ETP Canada. And now, here's Ted.
Well, thanks very much, Becky, and thank you all for tuning in once again. Welcome to the podcast, and we appreciate you being here. For those of you who've been listening over the last number of years or so, and for those of you who know me, you know I'm a huge fan of documentaries, and I'm very excited every time a new documentary comes across my desk, as did just several weeks back. And thrilled to tell you about it and to have an opportunity to speak with the director of the documentary. It's called Shutout. It is a compelling story of a fascinating personal and professional life of a former soccer star named Stephanie Labbe. She played goal for Canada's gold medal winning Canadian women's soccer team back at the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. But the road from Stoney Plain, Alberta to Tokyo was fraught with mental health challenges and gender barriers. Joining me now is, in fact, the director of the documentary Shutout, Cassie De Colling. It's a real pleasure meeting you, and thank you very much for taking the time. First of all, secondly, congratulations. A great documentary, very compelling story, excellently presented, and it's just grabbed me right from the beginning to the end. So many great twists and turns in this story, and the great thing is, it's true.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that's really awesome, Ted, that you say that. I think it's hard once you've finished a film or any piece of art to look at it and be like, there's always things you want to change, or did you quite get that? Or we had a screening in Vancouver, sold out to a bunch, mainly girls who play soccer came along, and it was so exciting to see them all, and I was so nervous, but they were so moved. They were laughing and crying, and I was like,
Yeah.
whoo!
Now, during the process of editing a documentary, you must come to one point where you just think to yourself, none of this means anything to me anymore. I've seen this and I've heard this so much. It's just all I'm lost. It's overwhelming after a while.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because so it gets sort of shaved down. So the first timeline of the film looks around about 2 hours, and it comes from what's called a paper edit, which is where I've grabbed the transcriptions and I've shaped together the story almost as like you would write it in a book
Right.
from the interviews. So that's our first pass. And then we cut that in half because we have to get the most compelling parts out. And sometimes there's a lot of repeated stuff. So then it's kind of like the second time you're watching it. And then you go into each of the sort of thematical moments, each of, you want to make sure you have, for me, I really work towards how am I crafting an emotional story? What's my 4-act structure? What's Stephanie's journey? Who's her Obi-Wan Kenobi? How does, I'm really thinking, yes, all of the things are true, but how can I maximize the impact of what she's saying? How can I make this relatable? How can I create themes of hope and despair and triumph within the context of this interviews or many interviews? So by 3/4 of the way, which is about 2.5 months in, my editor and I are on the brink because look at everything at least and it comes down to frame by frame, switching one shot to the other because that makes sense. So you become numb to it, and then you send it out and then send it to people for feedback or audience test screening, and then they're actually the ones that really help shape the last bit because it's almost too hard to see.
Yeah, I can imagine. People would have no idea unless you've actually sat through that process of what it's like. How did this project come to be? from your perspective?
From my perspective, well, I was very fortunate. I finished a project that was very successful for the same broadcaster, Talis Originals, called Precious Leader Woman, and that film won the Banff Mountain Film Festival. So after completing that film, and a production company had pitched another film to Talis Originals, and they came to me because they wanted me to direct it. It was based on a similar kind of story of a female athlete, personal struggles, and Olympics. So it came to me through the production company who essentially pitched it to me to direct it.
Hmm. It dawned on me at the beginning that most people would not know Stephanie Labbe, but most people in this country at, at the same time are very familiar with the Canadian women's soccer team because they've had such terrific success over the years.
I
And I
agree.
thought, yeah. And I thought, well, isn't it nice to be able to put some names to some faces so that it isn't just one entity? It is a collection of individuals, and they all have their own different stories. And Stephanie's is a fascinating one. She comes, first of all, from Stoney Plain, Alberta. For people not familiar with Stoney Plain, paint us a picture.
It's like the middle of nowhere. Like I already think Alberta is pretty like off the map. It's like you drive down from a freeway, down a dirt road, down another dirt road, down another dirt road, past, a church and a post office, down another dirt road. Um,
Yeah,
it's really just like isolated. Like it's we're quite conservative. Alberta is quite conservative, so
yeah.
generally, there was a lot of homophobia in Alberta. Like, I don't
Hmm.
think this quote got into the documentary in the end, but Steph told me that one of her friends who came out, her parents forced her to leave home. They said no, and they've never spoken since.
Yeah,
So it's still, very insular.
yeah. And she came from a very religious family, but her parents are much more open minded, and she came from a family just like every small town in Alberta and small town in Canada has a passion for hockey.
Yeah.
And her brother played hockey, and she took up the sport of hockey. Had no interest in soccer. In fact, and I found this very funny because it's a similar situation with my older brother and I, except I never went on to become the goalie for the Canadian women's soccer team. But he used to take shots at me. I put on the goalie equipment, and he was older than I, and he just started whistling pucks at me. And when I heard her talking about that, it made me laugh because it brought back so many different memories. But that's almost like a typical Canadian life
There's a bit
in
of
a small
a
town.
rite of passage. Yeah, I think,
Yeah,
and that was something because I'm Australian, and so it would have been different if it was it was similar with like Australian football. Like all of the kids in school here have like a hockey stick. In Australia, everybody has like Australian football ball and the football
yeah,
jerseys. And I, yeah, I remember, I think the the family was into hockey. That I also was very aware, like that the family is, I don't want to say stereotypical, but yes, stereotypical Canadian. Like
yeah,
dad watches sport on the weekend, mum does the laundry. You know.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so Stephanie started playing hockey. She enrolled and she played not as a goalie, but as a forward or defenseman. I can't remember, but not as a goalie. And she played on a boys' team up until about 11 or 12, and then puberty kind of starts to set in, and now she has to have a separate locker room, and uh, she's feeling disenchanted, I suppose, feeling like she's kind of the odd man out, as it were.
Yeah, I think that is like just so true in like the society that we like live in. Like women are in a way are disenfranchised, and it begins as a young girls being, and it's, I guess, the soccer clubs, or the hockey clubs are like, you can have your own change room, but we don't actually have like a girls' team for you to play on. So
Yeah.
it ostracized her in a way that, okay, but I don't want to have my own change room, but it's like, I don't want to be different. I want to be able to fit in, but I don't fit in, you know? So it's almost like a subconscious thing, but it's very
And then,
important.
but suddenly along comes a female soccer team that she joins.
Hmm.
And she's like, what, 12, 13 at the time?
Yeah, I think so. I think well, I think she's 12 or 13. I think she might have been 11 even, but
Yeah,
I can
at a young age.
but
But now she feels like she's part of the group. Now she feels like she's surrounded by her peers, and hey, this is where I belong. And she starts checking out the position of goaltender. And goaltender is one of the positions where you're a part of the team, but you're by yourself. You're not out there running around like everybody else. You're just sitting there waiting for somebody to aim a ball at your head or at the net, actually. So you're although you're part of a team, you're still sort of ostracized at the same time.
yeah, and I, before the film, or as we went into pre-production, I went and took the position of goalkeeper at a local like social soccer club to sort
Uh
of
huh.
see what that feeling was like, and I found it completely terrifying because even though
Hmm.
are aiming for the back of the net, I think
Yeah.
people tend to also kick it straight to the goalkeeper because that goalkeeper is moving, so it distracts you. So there's another like moment of like, boom, we'll kick it straight in her face. But yeah, and it's a really different position from the rest of the team.
Well, not only you're not even wearing the same jersey.
You're not wearing the same jersey. There's all this chit chat that's happening on the field that you're not like in the flow of. Yes, you
Hmm.
are often like calling from the back, like drop back or like, cover this player. There's lots of direction happening on, but there's very rarely this communication back and forth. And I think that, yeah, it's not like when a goal is scored, you get a hug because you're at the other end of the pitch. So the other team members, you're different. Yeah.
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 Yeah. And you got to feel sorry for goalies when it comes to penalty kicks because it's like all you can do is just guess whether the ball is going to be kicked to your left or to your right. And you've got to make that decision before the ball has been hit in many cases. You're diving off to the left, and meanwhile, they've kicked to the right, and it makes you look like a complete and utter fool.
Yeah,
But it's just a guess.
it's just a guess. I recently was in a conversation about randomness and acts of randomness, and soccer and hockey have the highest percentage of randomness, meaning that, like, to score a goal, it can happen by chance. Or like it might hit the post, or it might come off somebody's stick in a strange way. Whereas
Yeah.
tennis, you have higher scores, and it's like helps to sort of like you have less room for error or less room for marginal difference. But as a soccer player as a soccer goalkeeper, there is really only so much you can do that's in your
Yeah.
control.
Yeah. Now she excelled at it at a fairly rapid pace to the point where she joined the under 16 team. Was that the national team?
She played for the Aviators, which is I think yeah, no, then she was on the national team. She was in the position of like backup goalkeeper, like third, fourth string at that point.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which can be a little depressing as well. I mean, as pointed out in the documentary, you're not out there playing with everybody else. You're by yourself. But if you're the number two or the number three goalie, you're not even in the game. The only action you're seeing is during practice, and you kind of have to sit there and wait for the person who may be a good friend of yours and hope that they kind of get injured so you can get into the game. It's a very weird situation.
This was for me the most interesting part of the story, in a sense that you're literally could spend years waiting for that person to get
Yeah.
injured who is your mentor and your friend and your so you have two things going on in your mind, right? There is,
Hmm.
I want to get to the top, but that means subconsciously I want my friend to get hurt, which or the only way I'm going to get to the top is if they retire or if they get hurt. And
Yeah.
it's I found that interesting because I didn't and I talked to Bev Priestman about this and some other coaches. They just had the tradition has been if the goalkeeper's playing well, you don't muck it up. You don't switch them up. You don't change anything. They have to play pretty badly to muck it up. And then because the scoring of soccer is so low, how do you really tell,
Yeah,
you know?
it's right. You're right. You're right because you're usually losing your winning games just 2-1, 1-0.
Mhm.
Very seldom are you going to is a goaltender going to allow 4 goals in a game, and usually that's a telltale sign that they won't be around for the next game.
Mhm.
But
So
you're right; it doesn't happen that often.
it doesn't happen that much. And it's the same with hockey. And it really made me empathize and feel for all of the goalkeepers out there that never get a light shined on them, you know?
Ted Wallachin returns in a moment.
Fashion to go for men on the go. Hey, it's Ted Wallachin for Tom's Place. If you're looking to refresh your wardrobe this season, the spring suit sale has been extended for 1 more week. Even the new arrivals are on sale. Spring and summer colors, new patterns, new designs. Designer suits sold elsewhere for as much as $5.99. Tom is selling for $179 to $279. And selected sports jackets, regularly up to $750, are 50% off. If there's a wedding on your schedule, we've got lots of great suits, shoes, and accessories. How about a tuxedo? Starting at only $5.99. Upstairs, we've got designer suits for $100 off. Buy 2 and get $125 off. Buy 3, $150 off. Say hello to spring suit fashions today at Tom's Place, 190 Baldwin Street, in the heart of Kensington Market. Tom's Place will suit you. Have you been tasked with the role of a state executor or expected maybe in the future you will be? Well, if so, let me make your life a lot simpler by introducing you to my friend Debbie Stanley. Debbie is the founder of ETP Canada. They specialize in estate administration. Their goal simply is to help Canadian executors understand their role and how to deal with the loved one's estate. Let's face it, there's no school for this, but ETP Canada offers services such as executor support, estate accounting, and they have a new online course called Executor Ready. It's an engaging video designed to make estate administration easier and affordable. And those are two comforting thoughts during a stressful time. So call Debbie Stanley at 1-866 309 0387. That's 1-866 309 0387. Or you can get her at info at etpcanada.ca. That's info at etpcanada.ca.
Now back to Ted Wallachin.
So at one point in the documentary, I'm watching it. I'm thinking to myself, well, I mean, she's got the world on a string. I mean, she's playing now in the under-19 national team. Also, she's received a scholarship from the University of Connecticut.
Mhm.
Wow, things are moving up nicely, but it's getting to be a little bit too busy in her head.
Yeah. Yeah. So I feel like for Steph, like she really, I think like a lot of us, we're trying to figure things out. We're trying to make it all work. We're trying to be recognized, and when we're not, we really feel confused by that. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, watching the film back after we finished the film like 6 months ago, so it's not just had the premiere. Watching it back like with a 6 month break, right? I had noted a couple of times in the film that she walked away from the game.
Yeah.
And I remember when she told me that, and I was like, oh yeah, I didn't think that much about it. But for some reason, 6 months down the track, I was like, do you know what it means to walk away from your career, from everything that you put yourself in to create your identity? That every person would be like, hey, Steph, how's soccer? Like, you are known as that. Like Ted, hey, Ted, how's the radio show going? Like that being the first thing that everybody, hey, Ted, people, who are you
Yeah.
speaking to lately? Anyone interesting? And then to be like, yeah, I'm not doing it anymore. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm decided I'm done with it. Like,
Yeah. And in the meantime, I mean, she goes to the University of Connecticut. She's good and she's enjoying it. There's no options in Canada. There's no soccer scholarships in Canada, Canadian universities,
yeah,
and she wants to compete. And in order to continue with the national team, you've got to be competing on a regular basis. She goes to University of Connecticut. She enjoys it there, and she meets a lover. And she comes out. Now she's faced with, what do I tell my parents? And she's got this ongoing battle in her mind where she's saying to herself, they know, for sure they know. No, they don't know. Yeah, they know. No, they don't know. Yeah, they know. And again, as I mentioned earlier, she grew up in a quite a religious family. So talk about being conflicted in so many different ways. And that getting lost in a lot of the noise, I think, is the actual quote that's used in the documentary.
yeah, yeah. I think it's just really hard. Like, I can't, like, I'm straight, so it's hard for me to talk about like coming out, but it's like, it is just like mind boggling that people have to come out in this world in a
Yeah.
sense. Like
Yeah.
it can't I would just be like, "Hey mom, can we seeing this guy? He's going to come over tomorrow night." You know, if you're why can't we need to get to a place where it's like, "Hey mom, I'm seeing this girl. She's going to come over tomorrow night."
Yeah.
You
Well,
know?
we're getting there. We're
We
getting there slowly,
I
but
think we
remember,
are.
this
I
was
think we're
years
getting
ago
there.
as
Like,
well.
yeah, I think, and that was interesting for, like, I feel like talking about that for Steph, which was, it must have been like early 2000s. It was cool to see that things have changed since then. You know,
Hmm.
we are
And
much
she
more
went to.
open.
Yes, we are. Yeah, and well, and then sometimes I take a look down south and I think to myself, "Oh my God, they're going backwards." But that's another story altogether. She went to Sweden and played pro for a while. How was that experience for her?
I think that was actually really hard for her. I think that's what she thought that she wanted consciously. That's what she was striving for to get to. She needed to make money, and she loved soccer. So going to Europe and playing in a league, um, and it was very isolating for her. She didn't speak the language. It became very close with the family that she not home exchange, but sort of stayed with. They became very close, but ultimately, her mum got a really sad diagnosis of um, ovarian cancer, and Steph felt really stuck. Being that far away from her family,
Yeah,
and compounded with the mental health issues that she was having of feeling very isolated. I don't know. It's hard. It's like, yeah, she ended up like having to like sort of put herself in a position of what's more important. Is my being with my family more important, or trying to win this rat race where I'm not even playing that
yeah,
much?
yeah. At one point, she joins a men's team in Calgary.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's almost like, well, here we go. It's the circle starts again.
Yeah, totally. Totally. I'm glad you noticed that. It was like that.
Yeah,
Yeah. Um and it was cool. She joined this men's team, and she is a really great goalkeeper. So it wasn't a question about her gender. She was keeping the balls out of the net, right? So um, the reason it became kind of controversial is when they rang the like MSL, the soccer league, and said, like, we want to put Steph in our goalkeeper spot. And they said there's no way Steph is a woman and this is a men's league, even though it wasn't defined in the paperwork that it was a men's league. And I don't know, like I look at this as like really interesting, like thing, because Steph needed to be on a team and she needed to be playing to qualify for the Olympics, right? For
Right.
her to potentially get to Tokyo. And so because she had left Sweden and she was sort of stuck that there was no options in Canada, and she had also been working in Washington DC. I'm kind of getting my dates a bit mixed up here, so just so you know when you're editing. Um, she had been working in Washington, D.C. as a goalkeeper. They had come back from the 2016 Olympics in Rio, where she performed really well. And she
Hmm.
came back, and the coach sat her on the bench with no question, no explanation. And
Yeah.
so she effectively wasn't playing. So, in order for her to try and get to the next Olympics, she needed to be on a team. And because there isn't a team in Canada, but she wanted to be close to her family, close to her girlfriend, she opted to go and play with the men's team. And the men's team loved it. She was keeping the balls out of the net. She was, accepted by everybody. But the huge question was that she had a vagina, right? So
Yeah.
it wasn't going to work. Um, but what it proved was that if she hadn't have done that at all, she may not have made the cut for the Olympic team. In fact, she probably wouldn't have made the cut. But she went
Yeah.
and thought out of the box and found a solution that was very unconventional. And I think that we all can learn from that, that sometimes we think there's no options for us. Maybe just do something crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. No kidding. And during all this time, I mean, again, it's like one hurdle after another, after another. People think of an athlete's life as being something. Oh wow, man! Just what I'd love to be an athlete when I grow up. You know, you keep progressing and things getting better, and you get more money and more exposure, and things getting better. And you have no idea of all the personal strife that happens in one person's life, and all the different hurdles that pop up out of normal. It's like your life has become a whack-a-mole game. You know, it's like bang boom, bang boom. And so, but the great news is she gets to the Olympics in 2020 in Tokyo. Sadly, it's during COVID, so it's again a kind of a totally different situation. She gets injured, but makes a. I don't want to give too much away because I don't want to kill the suspense. But she saves a penalty shot while she's injured.
Yeah, and it was the most watched Canadian sport at the Olympics. It was the penalty shootout of the women's soccer.
Yeah,
And she was severely injured. And yeah, she just transformed in that moment. And it's incredible. It's like there's Steph, and then there's this Steph with this supernatural Steph kind of
yeah.
coating around her. And yeah, it's the moment, and I'll tell you one thing, that Olympics footage is very expensive. But I always have this idea of intercutting back and forth with some real life moments of that moment being relived. So one of the things that we did in the process of making the film was I had my iPad, and I had that penalty shootout copied onto it, and I played it back to her loved ones, and we filmed that. And watching people's expression in that moment is one of the highlights of the film for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, watching it back on the big screen, I was like, this is my favorite part of the film.
What are the techniques that you utilize, which I found extremely effective, is having her in her net in the goal net, but it's nighttime. Clearly, it's not during a game. It's her sort of pacing back and forth in the net, and it's her talking. She's delivering the dialogue, and you hear her thoughts, and it's set in darkness. And I thought, well, it's that says so much about what her life must have been like. A lot of darkness.
Yeah.
In
Thank you for, noticing that. That was a kind of a, I guess I call it a motif that I wanted to create to imbue a mood and a feeling of Steph's
Yeah,
world. And so, yeah, we set up a night where we had her just kind of go through some of the motions of what it was what it was like at rock bottom.
yeah,
And then, yeah, I think just helping people understand, like, you're in it, the net is almost like a cage,
yeah.
you know.
Well, as a viewer, it's jolting, and it brings you back to her reality. The excitement of the cheers and the great saves and everything is that makes you feel great as you're sitting there in your couch. And then all of a sudden, when you cut to these darker scenes, it's like, well, this is what's going on in her head. This is another part of the reality, and it's kind of it brings you down a little bit. I'm not saying that in a bad way. It's just it brings you down to reality, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think it brings you into her perspective.
Yeah, precisely, precisely. And everybody knows that they went on to win gold. I mean, I'm not giving anything away because it's historical fact. So there's just no spoiler alert here when it comes to history, right? But then after she decides after the Olympics, well, now I am going to retire for
Mm.
sure, for sure. And what was her thought process there? And what were her dreams or aspirations?
I think she was just exhausted. I think
Yeah,
that I think there. I don't. I think I'm going to get the saying wrong, but I think she was just feeling kind of flogged. Like, I think she set out to achieve what she wanted to achieve, and which was, being the goalkeeper at the Olympics, and she knew life is long, and I have a whole other job to do, and I want to change what was my story for the next generation. And I think of it as like almost this like letting go of her ego, which is really powerful and really, you don't see that many athletes do that. We know the greatest athletes in the world because they've been around for decades. And,
yeah,
Steph had been through two bronze Olympics. Well, yeah, I should say. So Steph had been through winning bronze at the Rio Olympics and then taking home gold at Tokyo. And I think she sort of just said, look, I've put it all on the table. Do I really need to do it again? Maybe it's
yeah.
a time for the next goalkeeper to step up.
And I wonder if at that time she's thinking to herself, well, what about number two and three who are sitting on the bench? Remember when that was like, Steph? Remember when you were number three? What do you think number three is thinking right now? Wouldn't she be happy if I decided I'm going to step down because she becomes number two or even number one?
Mhm. Mhm.
So I'm wondering if those thoughts crept into her mind as well. What not only what this would mean to her, but what this is going to mean to those people who are behind her in line.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, yeah, I think that she really gave a gift to herself and a gift to others, and she's admired for that. I think people really look at Steph as somebody who for people that Steph knows or who intently follow women's soccer, I think she's admired for her humbleness.
Yeah, and then she went on to join the Vancouver Whitecaps in the front office.
Yeah, she's the general manager building a women's team, women's league.
Yeah, yeah, that's great.
Mm.
Now, will we see her in any way, shape, or form on television during this summer's Olympics?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to text her and ask her. I actually don't know.
because I think that would probably she could bring a different perspective to the game than a lot of other athletes because of what she went through
Yeah.
and how she got there.
Yeah, she would bring a great context to different things. It would be,
Yeah,
yeah. Well, if I find out
just
that she is, I'll let you know.
yeah, please do. And the message is, for all the little girls out there who want to eventually play for the Canadian national soccer team, put on a pair of goalie pads and have your brother shoot hockey pucks at you in the basement. Because apparently that's where it all starts. At least if you're from Stoney Plain, Alberta.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
As I mentioned at the outset, Cassie, it's a great documentary. It's a terrific story. Stephanie Labbe is an incredible human being. What she's accomplished, and what she did for the country, and bringing home a gold medal along with her colleagues. It's great. I highly recommend it for everybody to look at. Well, whether you're a sports fan or not, this is the story of life.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. I can't wait
Think
for everybody to see it, It's really
no, I
important.
think uh, no, I think they're going to enjoy it very much. I'll appreciate your time.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate such a great chat, Ted.
Well, that'll do it for another episode of the Ted Wallachin podcast. Thanks for lending us your ears. And if you'd like to hear some of our past episodes, go to our website, www.tedwallachin.ca, and you will find those aforementioned episodes and an opportunity to drop your thoughts and your questions and your suggestions as well. We would appreciate that, and I would appreciate, while you're online, fill out your organ and tissue donation card, because you could change or even save a life. In the meantime, have a great week.
The Ted Wallachin podcast has been brought to you by Tom's Place. For the finest in men's clothing at unbeatable prices, it's Tom's Place at 190 Baldwin in the heart of Kensington Market. Tom's Place will suit you. And ETP Canada, providing estate administration with ease. The Ted Wallachin podcast is produced by me, Becky Coles. Technical production by Paul Gatt. Music by Bike Thieves. For more information on this podcast and our sponsors, and to talk to Ted, go to www.tedwallachin.ca.